Hi! Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Your support means a lot. Let's get started.
The shadows below. A journey into the unknown. The clock struck 11:45 p.m. as Ryan stepped onto the damp tiles of the eastbound metro station. The city above was alive with Friday night chaos. But down here, it felt like a different world. The air was heavy, carrying a mix of mildew and faint echoes of distant trains. He glanced at his phone. No service. Great, he muttered under his breath, pulling his jacket tighter. The next train wasn't due for another 20 minutes. He had hoped to catch the earlier one, but a last-minute meeting at work had derailed his plans. Now he was stuck in this dimly lit, eerily empty station. As he paced along the platform, his footsteps echoed unnervingly loud in the silence. The station's fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting shadows that seemed to dance and shift on the walls. Ryan tried to shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Just my imagination, he told himself, though his pulse quickened. He heard a faint clinking sound, like metal scraping against stone, coming from the far end of the platform. Turning his head, he saw nothing but darkness beyond the reach of the flickering lights. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. No response. Ryan considered moving closer, but decided against it. Something about the darkness felt wrong. He stayed where he was, glancing nervously at the clock. Still 15 minutes to go. Then he saw it, a shadow, long and thin, stretching out from the darkness. It moved, not like a person walking, but fluidly, almost like liquid spilling across the ground. Ryan froze. "Who's there?" he demanded, trying to sound braver than he felt. The shadow retreated, slithering back into the darkness as if it had been caught. Ryan took a step back, his heart pounding. He was just about to run for the exit when the lights went out completely. For a moment, there was nothing but pitch-black silence. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, coming from all around him. "Leave." Ryan turned and sprinted up the stairs, his breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. But when he reached the top, he didn't find the familiar street above. Instead, he stood at the edge of a forest, its trees towering and twisted, their branches clawing at the sky. Ryan stumbled back a step, his sneakers crunching against the forest floor. He spun around, expecting to see the stairwell leading back to the subway station. It was gone, replaced by thick, gnarled tree trunks that stood like silent sentinels. The forest stretched endlessly in all directions, cloaked in an eerie fog that clung to the ground like ghostly fingers. The air was colder here, sharp and biting, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and decay. Ryan's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. "This isn't real," he whispered to himself. "This can't be real." But the sting of the cold air on his skin and the distant rustling of leaves told him otherwise. He fumbled for his phone, desperate for light, only to find the screen still blank. No service. "Of course," he muttered, shoving it back into his pocket. A soft crunch echoed behind him. Ryan froze, every muscle in his body tensing. Slowly he turned his head, peering into the misty darkness. At first he saw nothing. But then, just at the edge of his vision, he noticed movement. A figure stood among the trees, partially obscured by the fog. It was tall and impossibly thin, its limbs unnaturally elongated. The figure didn't move, but Ryan felt its gaze cold, piercing, and unrelenting. "Hey," Ryan called out, though his voice trembled. "Do you know where we are?" The figure didn't respond. Instead, it tilted its head, almost curiously, before taking a slow step forward. Ryan's stomach twisted. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking. He grabbed a stick from the ground, holding it in front of him like a makeshift weapon. The figure stopped, but the oppressive feeling of its gaze didn't waver. Then, as if dissolving into the mist, it vanished. Ryan blinked, his mind racing. Had it really been there? Or was his fear playing tricks on him? Another sound drew his attention, a faint whisper, carried on the wind. It was soft at first, almost like a breeze, but it grew louder, more insistent. Run! Ryan didn't need to be told twice. He bolted, the stick falling from his hand as he sprinted through the forest. The trees seemed to close in around him, their twisted branches clawing at his clothes and hair. The whispers followed him, growing louder with every step. Run! But you can't escape. Ryan ran until his lungs burned, until his legs felt like they might give out. Finally, he stumbled into a small clearing, collapsing to his knees. The whispers had stopped, but the oppressive silence of the forest was almost worse. As he struggled to catch his breath, he noticed a faint light flickering through the fog. His heart leapt. Someone's here, he thought. He pushed himself to his feet and staggered toward the light, his hope growing with each step. But when he reached its source, his hope turned to dread. It wasn't a person or a campsite. It was an old lantern, hanging from the branch of a dead tree. Its flame flickered weakly, casting long, wavering shadows. Beneath it, a piece of parchment was nailed to the tree's trunk. Ryan hesitated before stepping closer, his hands trembling as he reached for the parchment. The words scrawled across it sent a chill down his spine. Beware the shadows. The forest feeds on fear. Before Ryan could react, the lantern flickered and went out, plunging him back into darkness. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, from the shadows came the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. Ryan's breath slowed as the subway's noise faded into the background, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds. The oppressive metallic scent of the underground was gone, replaced by the earthy freshness of the forest. For a moment, it felt like he had entered another world entirely, one where the rules of time and space didn't quite apply. He glanced around. The forest was dense, the trees towering above him, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out most of the light. It felt like an endless labyrinth of nature, but Ryan knew this was just the beginning. As he walked deeper into the woods, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The quiet of the forest, while peaceful, seemed unnatural in its stillness. His steps grew slower, more deliberate. He turned a corner in the path and suddenly stopped. There, in the middle of the trail, was a figure just a silhouette at first, but then it stepped into the light. It was Lena. Lena? Ryan's voice trembled slightly, unsure if this was real or some strange manifestation of his mind. She didn't answer at first. Her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made him feel like he was being pulled into something deeper. Slowly she spoke, her voice soft but firm. You shouldn't be here, Ryan. Confusion washed over him. What do you mean? I've been following the map. I thought I was supposed to be here. Lena shook her head. This place, it changes people. It's not just a forest. It's something more. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. And you're not ready for it. Ryan's heart raced. He had thought the map was the key, the guide that would lead him to the answers he had been searching for. But now, standing face to face with Lena in this eerie place, doubt crept in. What was he really chasing? Why are you here? Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena's gaze softened for a moment, then she pointed to the horizon. There's something deeper in these woods. Something you'll only find if you keep going. But remember, every step you take in here costs something. Ryan hesitated. A strange pull urged him forward. Yet Lena's words echoed in his mind. What was the price of this journey? Would he be the same person when he reached the end? Go ahead, Lena whispered, stepping aside. But be careful what you seek. The forest doesn't give back what it takes. Ryan stood frozen for a moment, staring into the depths of the forest, the path ahead both inviting and terrifying. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face whatever lay beyond, but the desire for answers, for understanding, was too strong to ignore. With a final glance at Lena, he stepped forward into the unknown. Ryan's footsteps echoed in the silent forest as he moved forward. Every step felt heavier, as though the earth beneath him was pulling him deeper into its secrets. He could feel the weight of Lena's words, pressing against him. The forest doesn't give back what it takes. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. And as he ventured further, the light grew dimmer. The trees seemed to close in on him, their twisted branches creating eerie shadows on the path. He tried to shake off the growing sense of dread creeping over him, but it was hard to ignore the chill that had settled in his bones. After what felt like hours, Ryan stumbled upon a clearing. At the center stood a massive stone structure, ancient and covered in ivy. It looked out of place, as though it had been forgotten by time. The air around it buzzed with an unsettling energy. The map he had been following had led him here. This was the destination. But what awaited him? He stepped closer, examining the stone surface. Strange symbols were carved into the rocks, intricate and alien. They pulsed faintly, almost as if they were alive. Ryan hesitated, his hand hovering over one of the symbols. He had no idea what they meant, but something about them seemed to call to him. Before he could touch the stone, a voice cut through the silence. "You came," Lena said, stepping into the clearing. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with warning. "You don't understand, Ryan. This is not just a place. It's a test, a sacrifice." Ryan turned to face her, confusion swirling in his mind. "A test? What kind of test?" Lena took a deep breath, her eyes flickering nervously toward the stone structure. "The forest gives you answers, but it takes something in return. Every question you ask, every truth you uncover, has a price. And the price can change you. It can break you." Ryan stared at the stone, his desire for the answers growing stronger than ever. But Lena's words echoed in his mind, and he could feel the weight of them pressing down on him. Was he willing to pay that price? "Why didn't you stop me earlier?" Ryan asked, his voice tense. "You knew what was at stake." "I tried to warn you," Lena replied, her voice heavy with regret. "But you were already too far in. Now you have to decide. The forest doesn't give you a choice. Once you step into its grasp, it's already made up its mind." Ryan took a deep breath and looked at the stone again. The symbols seemed to beckon him, urging him to step closer. His mind raced. Was he ready for whatever was about to happen? Would he be able to handle the truth? Without another word, he reached out and pressed his palm against the stone. The moment he touched it, the world seemed to shift. The trees around him trembled. The ground beneath his feet groaned, and the air grew thick with an oppressive weight. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as the symbols on the stone flared to life, casting an eerie glow over the clearing. Images flooded his mind, visions of distant places, of people he had never met, of things he could barely comprehend. The answers he had been seeking were within his grasp, but the pain that came with them was overwhelming. He felt as if the weight of all the knowledge in the universe was pressing down on him, threatening to crush him. Suddenly he pulled his hand away, gasping for breath. The vision stopped, and the forest returned to its quiet stillness. Lena was staring at him, her expression a mixture of sorrow and relief. "You've seen it, haven't you? The truth." Ryan nodded slowly, his head spinning. He had seen things that didn't make sense, yet felt more real than anything he had ever known. But the cost, the price of that knowledge, it had already begun to change him. "Now you understand," Lena whispered. "The forest takes what it needs. And now, It's your turn to decide what you're willing to give. Ryan stood there, breathless and broken, as the weight of the forest's truth settled on his shoulders. He had the answers, but they came at a cost he hadn't been prepared for. The journey was far from over, but now he had to face the consequences of what he had uncovered. Ryan stood frozen in the clearing, his mind reeling from the overwhelming visions that had crashed through him. The world felt distorted, as though the forest itself had shifted, leaving him standing at the precipice of something unknown. Lena's words echoed in his ears. The forest takes what it needs. But now, Ryan wasn't sure what the forest had taken, or what was left of him. He glanced at Lena, whose expression had softened, though a sadness lingered in her eyes. "You made the choice," she said quietly. "Now you have to live with it." Ryan swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. The images still swirled in his mind, haunting him. The truths he had uncovered, things he was never meant to know, pressed against his consciousness like an unbearable weight. But amidst the chaos, there was something else. A realization. "I don't think I can go back," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lena nodded slowly. "Once you've seen what the forest reveals, there's no returning to who you were. But you can choose how to move forward. You can choose what the cost of that knowledge means." Ryan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He had come here seeking answers, but in doing so, he had unraveled the very fabric of his own reality. And now the forest had claimed its price. He turned to face the stone structure again. The symbols on it glowed faintly, as if waiting for him to make his final decision. The forest was silent, the air still, as though everything had come to a standstill. In that moment, Ryan understood. The forest had shown him everything it could. Now it was up to him to decide what to do with the knowledge. The truth was both a blessing and a curse. And the choice before him wasn't just about accepting what he had learned, but about deciding what kind of person he would be moving forward. Would he let the darkness of the forest consume him? Or would he find a way to carry the truth without letting it destroy him? "I have to keep moving," Ryan said, his voice steadier now. "I have to use what I've learned, not to change the world, but to change myself." Lena smiled faintly, the sadness in her eyes giving way to something resembling hope. "Then you've made your choice." Ryan took one last look at the stone, then turned and walked away. With each step, he felt the burden of the knowledge he carried, but he also felt a strange sense of freedom. The forest had taken what it needed, but it had also given him the opportunity to decide what he would do with what remained. As he moved deeper into the woods, the path ahead seemed both unclear and infinite. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Ryan wasn't afraid. He wasn't sure where the journey would take him, but he was ready to face whatever came next. The forest had shown him the truth, and now, it was up to him to write his own story.